Patch 1.14 notes. All right,
Oh,
guys. So we've got a lot to read about. They're slapping us with a metagame snapshot at the
Ooh.
top. I'm going to skip to the patch notes for now, and we'll read other things later. Lucian,
That's huge.
level 2, can now trigger the same round as leveling up. That is actually pretty big. I do kind of like that they're buffing Lucian a little bit. I think this was a good choice to buff him if they were gonna buff him at all.
Yeah.
I like that. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Shyvana goes to 4 power. All right. So suddenly she's gonna represent a little bit more of a threat. I think she might have needed a health more than a power here.
Yeah, I think that was the
That being
issue.
said, I think dragons might be buffed in another way. Let's see. Let's check it out. Vladimir. Here we go. Old text. For each attacking ally other than Vladimir, deal 1 and 1. Now new text is for each attacking ally on my right, deal 1 to it and 1 to the enemy nexus. I love this change. This addresses like one pretty major fundamental flaw with Vladimir was the inability to actually control what you dealt damage to. This is a big change, by the way. This is a big buff. It's bigger than it probably looks at first. The biggest problem with Vladimir, the single biggest problem with Vladimir was that you wouldn't be able to, like, sometimes you just have a unit that dies, and that's, even if there's only one unit that dies, that's maybe already not worth it. I love this change. I love this change. I think this was the best single change they could have done to Vladimir. And his level up is easier to get now too. You can have 5+ allies survive damage. I think the size of this change can't be understated. Like, seriously. The fact that Vladimir was killing your allies sometimes was the single biggest thing holding him back. Like, by far. Vladimir is so much better now. This is like an actual card. People are going to experiment with ways to play him. Trundle, -1 health. And Ice Pillar, -2 health. That's pretty big. This is pretty much the kinds of changes everyone was expecting. For sure. Trundle will definitely be a lot more killable now. How big of a deal is this, you think?
I think it is pretty big. The 1 health is huge.
Yeah, we have to keep going because it's hard to talk about. At the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to meta and alternatives, right? Let's just go through everything first.
What? No way.
Whoa! Whoa!
Text?
Wait. They changed the text. Hang on. So Ezreal goes down to 6 targets to level up, but they changed the new text. So when you cast a spell, deal 1 to the nexus. If it targeted an enemy, then deal 2 to the enemy nexus instead. Interesting. I can't. That's very, very interesting.
That is broken as fuck. This 6+ is like unfair.
That's true.
Like,
there's a lot of spells though that the fact that they'll only be dealing 1 damage, like Rummage, or like you can't like Mystic. Like the whole point of Ezreal's Reach was the ability to like Mystic Shot and Get Excited face and use Rummages. Like you were completely ignoring enemy units at that point in the game. And now, I mean, the thing is, when you look at this second line here, if it targeted an enemy, deal 2 to the enemy nexus instead, ask yourself, when will this matter? Like if you have Mystic Shot or Get Excited, you're using that on face either way. If you have Rummage, that's not targeting an enemy. Like, when post Ezreal flip do you want to target an enemy? When? Thermo? Sometimes, like, 0-mana Thermos. There are some cases where you Static Shock post Ezreal, but even that doesn't matter that much. I would say, like, the thing is, like, Ezreal in almost every case will still be dealing 1 to the Nexus post level. And that's a really, really big difference, right? Like...
Not to Karma. But the thing is, I think we're missing Ezreal SI. We're gonna talk about this later.
Yeah.
But I think Ezreal SI will be a problem with the Gohards.
At the end of
it
the
will
day,
be a huge problem
with the Gohards. Yeah, Gohards are pretty big, for sure. I do think Ezreal. I mean, he's definitely getting buffed. I don't dislike this change. It's really hard to evaluate without playing around with it. There's some changes that we can predict fairly accurately. This is a really, really hard one. This is definitely a little scary. Like,
I don't like it.
We don't know where things are gonna get up. I think that I'm willing to say I think this is less strong than it might look to some people. There's a lot of people in chat just spamming like, this is crazy, this is like absolutely insane, will terrorize the meta. I don't think I would think it's that strong per se, but it has the potential for that. It actually could end up being like that. That's something I can't rule out. And yeah, it's a little scary.
Yeah.
Jinx cannot trigger the same round as leveling up.
Oh no.
Wait, doesn't that mean she always triggers the same round as leveling up?
Yes, that means you get a
Oh.
rocket the first turn you level her up. That's not okay. That's
Whoa!
not okay. That's not
Whoa!
okay. That is not okay.
What? Read text. Hang on. Is there a change? If you play Jinx with an empty hand and she levels up, she won't create a rocket right away. You need to empty your hand in some way. Yeah, but that's only if you play Jinx with an empty hand. If you just rummage post Jinx, that will still. They're not really clarifying exactly.
So basically, if you rummage to level up Jinx, you'll need to play the other 2 cards to get the rocket that turn.
I think. So this basically doesn't matter at all then.
So it doesn't matter.
It's almost impossible to imagine a situation where this changes anything. If that's the way it works.
Yeah. I think.
It just helps like sometimes when you draw Jinx super late, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Taric goes from 2 power to 3.
Won't matter that much.
Yeah, this was probably the weakest change they could have done to Taric. He probably, like, even, like, his level up going at 6 instead of 7 might have helped more than this. He can block Fearsomes now. Yeah, he can block Fearsomes now. He really needed, like, yeah, 1 more health or something. Maybe, like, lower stats, but for 3 mana. I think, like, +1 para to Taric, yeah, I think this is probably going to be one of the weaker changes. Like, Taric decks never really needed the ability to barrel down the opponent super fast. The biggest problem with Taric is he needs the stars to align to make sense. You need to like double float, you need to play a unit on 3, you need to play Taric on 4, and then you need to have like a spell that works for your double float, like Pale Cascade, and then you need to be attacking usually on that turn. Like, Taric just needed everything to work out well. Him having 1 extra point in power doesn't change almost anything at all, actually.
Yeah.
Tiana goes to an 8/8. So back in the day, in like pre-beta, Tiana was a 7 mana card, and they nerfed her to 8. If they buffed her again to 7 mana, that would be kind of scary. I think that at 8 mana, I don't think this will make too much of a change. Overall,
no.
I don't expect this card to be like meta or anything. Wording Stones goes to 3 health. I saw a lot of predictions in chat. I saw a ton of predictions in chat expecting Wording Stones to go down to 3 health. This is a huge change. Absolutely massive change.
Yeah.
Gigantic. So what this means is basically with stuff like Trundle. Fiora. Oh yeah. Yeah, you're just saying it'll die to like some things, yeah.
Yeah.
But in the ramp deck, the identity of ramp gets a lot worse. Ramp gets a lot worse. It's crazy. Between nerfing Trundle and Wording Stones, I think we can kind of say like bye-bye to that deck for now. I'm sure it'll come back later. I'm perfectly fine with this. Maybe it'll still stick, like, it might have to still stick around in some capacity, but I don't think it can be tier 1 anymore, which I'm pretty happy with right now. I don't think it was over nerfed, at least from what I've seen so far. Fuzzy Caretaker. Whoa. Yeah. Oh, it's a 3 cost?
So, okay. I think it will not impact the Lulu Shen archetype thing because the curve doesn't fit anyway.
Yeah.
But it will. We might see Fuzzy Caretaker in different decks, maybe in like the Demacia decks, stuff, etc., etc.
It's
like
if this card was a 3 mana 2/3, I would like it so much more. So Fuzzy Caretaker, obviously going down in 1 cost for 1 health is a great exchange. That's great, and you want that. Like, this card is a lot better, and Fuzzy Caretaker people kind of don't think about it that much, but it was actually really well positioned to be like a central card in the support archetype. Like, this is a good kind of card to try to change to support the support archetype, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure.
But I'm always scared of a 3-mana 3/2. That's always like a really vulnerable stat line. There's so many things like Laurent Protege, Fleet Feather Tracker, Avalanche, Mystic Shot. Like, 2 health on turn 3 is a really bad place to be.
I think it's a nerf, by the way.
Honestly, it actually could be. I think it's a buff, but it's a pretty small one.
Mm-hmm.
Mina goes up in power, up in health, and gets quick attack.
Useless. Okay.
I think I might agree with that. We're going one at a time. Let's not.
I know. I'm joking.
Mina,
joking.
Okay, Mina, you're right. Mina, at the end of the day, you look at Mina, and she kind of has the same problem as Tiana, which is that on turn 8 and turn 9, your card that has a powerful deploy ability that will usually win the game on the spot, the identity of giving that card a little bit more stats changes almost nothing. Like, Tiana's not a bad card. She does auto-win some games, but her being an 8/8 instead of a 7/7, like, imagine a specific enough game that actually affects that ability to change the game, right? That's like almost unimaginable. It's crazy. Mina is kind of the same thing, which is that, you know, she was winning the game sometimes, but it takes a pretty specific game to make this change end up mattering enough. I do think that both of these cards have been pretty underrated in the past.
Mm-hmm.
They're definitely not bad cards now.
I agree. But for 9 mana, it will be.
I saw so many people in chat saying Funsmith is going to get buffed. Do you guys know something I don't? Is this like insider trading? Like,
ooh, Blacksmith.
I saw so many of you guys predict Funsmith was going to get buffed. I saw Blacksmith buff. Everyone was saying in chat, Swim Funsmith is going to get buffed, Swim Blackspear is going to get buffed. There are definitely some informants in chat. There's some insider trading going on here. There's some sneaky Riot employees or something. There's something going on. But what that means is next time there's a balance patch, I'm actually going to be reading chat a lot more carefully. Ooh. What the heck? This is like fucking Nostradamus. Like, how do they... These are such specific predictions. Okay. Funsmith. 4/13. Is that scary?
Yes, very terrifying. I'm shaking. The one mana matters a lot. I think especially with the Ezreal change, it will, like, I would run this in with Ezreal, unironically. I think the fact that
I wouldn't say terrifying, but this looks viable. It looks like something you could put in a deck.
Yeah. Like, the difference between turn 5 and 4 is like huge. It's, I think, the biggest like difference in terms of like mana.
Yeah.
As we've seen this with like Trundle being able to ramp into Trundle on 4, etc., and other champions and other cards, like hearth cards. Like, the difference between 4 and 5 is huge. The fact that you can play Funsmith on 4, I think we might see Funsmith with like Ag or like Burn. Burn might come back just because of Funsmith. Because
so for those of you guys who don't know, Funsmith at 5 mana was closer to competitiveness than it probably seemed. There were a couple times in the past where people actually experimented with Funsmith, and like, it wasn't good, but it was actually not that far off in some burn decks or some Ezreal decks. Mostly those were like the dominant metas for Funsmith.
Yeah,
it's considerable. It is. I don't think it's like, I don't think it's gonna be terrorizing the meta, but I could see this card actually making decks. I like these changes.
Mm-hmm.
Black Spear and Callista's Black Spear now goes to 4 damage. The difference between 3 and 4 damage is
huge.
Pretty big. Like, historically, this is one of the biggest breakpoints of damage ever. Like, I remember when the base set launched, and the difference between 3 and 4 damage, we were all like jerking it off so much because there was no way to deal 4 damage in basically the entire game.
Yeah. 3 mana flock.
Yeah.
I mean,
the fact that an ally needs to die this round is still a big cost to this. Man, comparing this to Flock is pretty sad.
I know, right? Think about it. I think it's still very big. I think
I like this change.
A lot. They're giving SI more control tools and a good removal.
Yeah.
Early game.
Overall, I think so. My favorite thing about what they're doing with these changes, by the way, and this is like a really, really, really important point to note. This is like, I do like these changes overall. I like the direction of what they're doing, especially with some things. So A, they're taking a lot of cards that haven't been played as much in the past, like not just recently, but a lot of the cards targeted haven't really ever been meta. But B, they're focusing pretty well on cards that are sort of keystones for archetypes. This is really, really, really important. They're focusing well on like some high synergy cards that are actually trying to empower some, because right now, and even in the past, the game has always struggled with a lot of the archetypes that have not really seen play, like the Vlad archetype, or even like the Shadow Isles Death Trigger archetype. Shadow Isles has kind of almost never been a Death Trigger concept. It was a tiny bit at the first, and since then it's just been pure control. So, you know, Lucian, yeah, this is actually a bit of an archetypal card. Like, this can fit into Shadow Isles deck. Shyvana limits dragons, Vladimir for Crimson, and even some cards, and I mentioned this, like, even like non-champions, like, when you look at Caretaker, when I said specifically, like, this is a linchpin, right? This is kind of a keystone for support, because it does a double support and it comes out early. I don't know if this change in particular is going to be effective, but the important thing is it's not just the champions. There's a lot of cards that are kind of, like, specific to high synergy strategies that are well positioned to empower those if they're actually viable, right? And yeah, we see those in both Blackspear and Funsmith. Blackspear for the like Shadow Isles Death Trigger. It's so sad, like Shadow Isles is supposed to be a Death Trigger region, and we've almost never seen that. Like, think about it. We've almost never actually seen Shadow Isles be built around triggering deaths, except for literally the first month of the game.
Correct.
So that's cool. Riptide. Oh, Jesus. Oh, God. Wait, they said they weren't going to nerf Riptide. They said that wasn't going to happen.
They lied. Baited us. One cannon. I mean, it's fair, I guess.
And okay. Yeah, you guys are mentioning Endur was a Death Trigger archetype. Yes, it was a bit. You're right. It was not... It was mostly using literally like 2 cards in that vein, but sure. I shouldn't say there's no Death Trigger archetypes, but it just like there's only been like 1 deck. If you look through all of the Shadow Wells cards, it's like literally half their cards. But yes, there was Endur. You're right. So what do we think of this new Riptide, Rex?
Bilgewater was already in a pretty bad spot. So I don't know if this will help. After the Make It Rain nerf, they don't really have a solid archetype. Deep is not very good. They nerfed Petty Officer and they nerfed Make It Rain. Now that Rex is a bit nerfed as well, I think. Like, Bilgewater is in a very weak spot.
I think this is the first one I've seen that I'm just not a fan of. A lot of times things that happen with balance changes is that there's like just a kind of like latency between the change and like what meta is trying to target. I think like after all the changes... Bilgewater is pretty weak right now. Like, Swain TF is almost the only way to play them. They've gotten hit, in a lot of different ways recently. What was it? It was Petty Officer, it was Make It Rain.
Yeah, Make It Rain.
What else? There was at least a third one.
And the Jack.
Jack, yeah. And it felt like... I mean, Bilgewater was oppressive for a while, but I think nerfs stack up, like, kind of faster than people realize. Like, no matter how good a region is, if you're nerfing it like 4 times in a row, Grifter too, Grifter mattered. Grifter mattered. Grifter. And Riptide Rex was also nerfed off of, you know, just other Bilgewater cards being nerfed, but also some of the specific ones. Like Yordle Grifter, you know, was a big part of what enabled Rex. Make It Rain was a big part of what enabled Rex. I think this is a little... Yeah, this is the first one I really disagree with. I also want to point out that I think... Runeterra does have like probably slightly too weak finishers, and at the end of the day, like most of the people complaining about Riptide, I think it was mostly a byproduct of just like other finishers being too weak rather than Rex being too strong. But also his support was a little too good. His plunder was too easy because you had Yordle Grifter, you had Make It Rain, you had like everything Bilgewater had, his Plunder actually feels really hard to get off these days. It feels like an actual challenge against the smart player. It did feel a little too much here. Okay, Eclipse Dragon. Wow. Whoa, 7 health. This really matters.
It does.
That's actually a big change.
It does. It is a dragon buff for sure.
Yeah.
It is a buff to the dragon's archetype with an Azreal as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it does matter in the Azreal decks because we can afford to trade with Eclipse Dragon and keep the dragon on the board for to level Azreal.
Yeah.
First of all, and it does matter in the dragon's deck where obviously stats matter now that you can use single combat more reliably with Eclipse Dragon.
Yeah.
You can use the Fury more often just because you have more health. And it does. This buff is a great buff. It will matter in every deck that could run Eclipse Dragon.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I agree. I think so. One important distinction Kuvira is talking about, for those of you guys who don't know, Ezreal and Shyvana are basically 2 different decks. Like, it makes basically no sense to run them together. Shyvana Dragons is like a sort of tempo-oriented Demacia sort of beat down with big things deck, and I personally don't think there's really any place for Ezreal in that deck. If you want a game ender for the late game, Demacia already has plenty of good options there. Ezreal deck is kind of like, it could be rampish with Freljord, although Freljord did get some of its ramp tools nerfed. It could be, like a sort of invoke style deck, but I don't think really want to be part of the same deck, right? And Eclipse Dragon does empower both of those decks. Again, it's really important with patch notes to be kind of singling out these cards that are well positioned to buff. Like, this is something that potentially buffs multiple, in this case, I mean 2, distinctly different problem archetypes at the same. I say problem archetypes as in underpowered, not overpowered. Underpowered archetypes at the same. I think Eclipse Dragon was a pretty good choice. And also, the card is... It's a very interesting card that always felt too limited by its 5 health. I'm a big fan of this change in particular. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts overall, Kuvira?
I like most of the changes, honestly. This is a pretty good patch.
Yeah.
They covered
the best patch in a few months.
Yeah. We've had the Trundle nerf that we needed. The Shyvana buff is there as well. Mm-hmm. They changed some other cards. I really like the Vlad buff.
This is the biggest buff on this page.
Yeah.
I think I can guarantee that. Like, this is bigger than the Ezreal buff.
Okay.
I'm not saying it'll have a bigger meta impact than the Ezreal buff. Who knows? Maybe new Ezreal might be stronger than new Vlad, but this is a bigger buff. I think.
Yeah.
Like, and he's also one easier to level up too, right? Like, this is so big. It's gonna be, especially like, you can run Vlad and Bilgewater, and the fact that Vlad will so often be leveled on turn 5 is like scary.
Yeah.
So you can build Vlad, and I do like how Vlad is well positioned. Again, like, and this is, I think, so much of the balance philosophy that is, in my opinion, the most important, which is taking these cards that are sort of archetypal linchpins or key cards that have the ability to either hold something back or empower it. Because Vlad is, it's not just one deck, right? It's kind of meant to be played with Freljord, but there's synergy with like the Bilgewater self-damage cards. And there's even like, I mean, there's been times where people have experimented with like Vlad Demacia, which sounds really trolly, but it probably wouldn't make sense in the current card pool. But stuff like Ranger's Resolve and even the barriers hit that deck pretty hard, because Crimson Creator draws off of like barrier combat too. Like, it counts as surviving damage for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's actually not bad. Vlad Soraka, I don't know if Vlad Targon would work.
Vlad Freljord.
That might be a little too much. But yeah, Vlad Freljord and Vlad Bilgewater both have some real options here. I think Vlad might be the first thing I'll try in this patch, actually.
Yeah, probably not Bilgewater though, because Bilgewater's like, okay, you can level Vlad faster with Bilge because of the self-damage units, but then you don't really have a board to actually utilize his effects, I think. And Noxus doesn't have a way to actually protect the board, which is something that Bilgewater lacks as well. So I don't think that Vlad will work with Bilgewater. I would rather see Vlad with, I think, just Freljord, basically.
Yeah.
the fact that you can choose the units to damage is pretty big, honestly.
Like, okay, so Vlad has legitimately, like, Vlad is a much more versatile card than he seems. There was a point in time where people were trying out Vlad in like burn decks. Back when PNZ Noxus Burn was the shit, people were running, again, experimenting, but it wasn't as far off as it seems. The biggest reason people stopped running it is because, yeah, Vlad would kill your attackers sometimes. Like, Vlad couldn't make sense in aggro because he would kill your 1 health attackers when you didn't want them to die. Now that you can choose to opt out, you can choose to not kill your attack. Like, this changes everything. He, like, a 5-mana 5/5 is a perfectly valid stat line. His level up is easier than ever. This card can hit a lot of decks right now. I love this change.
Me too. I think it's a very, very smart change.
So overall, you know, the summary here is basically Lucian. Some people are saying this is gigantic. I think it's pretty big. This is pretty big. I think we will see some experimentation for Lucian decks. At the end of the day, I'm not keen on dragons. I think Shyvana probably felt like it needed a bit more than +1 power, honestly. It feels kind of hard for this kind of like fair style mid-range deck to be super overwhelming, but honestly, it's not bad. What do you think about dragons?
I think dragons will still struggle, honestly. The +1 attack on Shyvana is like, it's noticeable for sure.
Yep.
But I don't think it's what Shyvana needed. Shyvana needed either +1/+1, or especially the health. The health is very important.
Yeah.
And because she has to attack every single turn. When you have to attack, when you have a champ that has to attack, the health matters.
Exactly.
Much.
I thought she was getting +1 health, and I was ready to be like, oh wow, this could be Shyvana time.
Yeah.
This patch seems promising. Yeah, I really like it so far, Julio. Ezreal could definitely be a terror on the new meta. Trundle decks are going down. Trundle decks, we're selling out of Trundle decks. Stocks are going down in Trundle. Sell out of Trundle. Short Trundle, right? And we've got, you know, and a large part of that is the Weirding Stones change, which is huge. And I think some people were predicting Weirding Stones would go back to 3. I think in the vein of nerfing Ramp as an archetype, I think this was one of the bigger things to hit. I'm still a little scared of, like, you know, Troll Chant's ability to keep Weirding Stones alive. I think this was a good hit, though. Like, between Weirding Stones and Trundle, it feels pretty good. I will caution, I know Trundle did get kind of double nerfed here. I think this card is still playable, which isn't a bad thing. And in fact, it's a good thing, but anyone who's so sick of Trundle and expecting him to be completely dead, I think, like, the Ice Pillar minus health does matter, but it's fairly rare. And the 1 health obviously matters quite a bit, but Trundle's still going to be like a viable card that floats around, which I think is perfectly fine. But some traumatized people just want cards to be dead for a while. You never want a card to be dead forever, but sometimes you just don't want to see something for a few months. You know, Jinx change. This is the one that doesn't really change anything if we're reading this right. Unlike Lucian's, they got the same text, but Lucian's actually changes a lot. Jinx just changes pretty little. Taric also gets pretty much nothing. Even worse than Shyvana's change. Like, Shyvana could actually, that archetype could use the beatdown of like +1 power. Taric, I think, can't use that at all. And I do think that it was down here. I do think Fuzzy Caretaker, I don't think that the support archetype is really going to be nuts all of a sudden. I think that they might have needed like a central card to be a little bit better, like Lulu. Whereas like Fuzzy Caretaker, you know, it'll see experimentation, but we'll see.
I mean, this means that Fuzzy Caretaker now like curves with Tiari, for example.
Okay. And Black Spear. What's the consensus on Black Spear? Will you actually be able to fit this in decks?
Yes.
What kind? But like, which decks? Like, how many? Because we have this could have big meta implications potentially.
Just SI control in general. It's pretty good in SI control. I would maybe like Endure could actually play this card as a 1-off or 2.
Endure.
Yeah, I would see it. I would actually see it.
I think Endure needs a lot to change for Endure to be good, I think.
Right. But I think I would see it. And,
I don't like this card in Endure. I agree with Bones.
Precipic said he would run it.
Ooh, interesting. Yeah, I think Endure wants to play a bit more beatdown.
Yeah. So just general SI control, and maybe Undyings, which is funny.
Okay. But yeah, overall, these are good changes. I like them. There's a couple of champions that I do kind of wish got touched. Like, a lot of people are, because they mentioned they were going to buff some of the foundation champions that weren't working, and a lot of people are PP handsing for Katarina. Overall, I think these are pretty good hits. Like, there's a couple minor misses, and some of the changes won't do much, but this is the best patch we've had in a while. This actually feels like it'll make a notable difference. Unlike, I mean, you guys have seen my last like 4 balanced patch reviews have been pretty depressing. I'm not gonna lie. This one, you know, it's pretty good. I rate this patch. Okay, this, to me, if I had to rate it out of 10, I'm a stern critic. Keep that in mind. This is like a 7.5. I think
say 7,
which I think is good. Don't get like, look, listen, I'm harsh. You know, a 10 out of 10, that would be pretty hard to get for me. And the last several patches have literally been like, some of them have been 2s or 3s. Like, you know, I'm pretty critical. I'm not gonna go easy. 7 is a good score. It's a very solid score for me. 7.5. This is a positive patch. Most of the changes are great. So that's my initial impressions. I'm gonna expand this call now. I'll get like Precipic and Bones if you guys want to join this call, and we'll talk about like a bit more in detail about some of these predictions. Get your guys' input. Maybe you guys disagree with some of these, as well as like maybe talk a bit more about meta predictions.